Heads, one tail, Yang Yin. Three tails, Old Yin. Two tails, one head, Yang Yang. heads, one tail, yang yin. Three tails, old yin. Two tails, one head, yang yang. We'll begin with a short passage from Immortal Sisters. Secrets of Taoist Women. The writings and poems of 6 distinguished Taoist women adepts writing between the 4th and 12th centuries, including the legendary Sun Bu'er. These translations shed light on the spiritual methods used by these women and illustrate the prominence of the feminine in Taoism. Spiritual alchemy for women. In the science of essence and life, men and women are the same. There is no discrimination. In some, what is important is perfect sincerity and profound single-mindedness. An ancient document says only perfect sincerity in the world is capable of ruling. A classic says the perfection of single-mindedness is that whereby one may heed the order of life. In general, what is most essential at the beginning of this study is self-refinement. Self-refinement is a matter of mind and breathing, resting on each other. This means that the mind rests on the breathing and the breathing rests on the mind. What is most important in this is harmony. Harmony is in balance. Balance is in harmony. Are they one or two? The union of balance and harmony is called the go-between. With the harmonious attunement of the go-between, there is natural mutual love between mind and breathing. There is mutual attraction, mutual inspiration, mutual expiration. Continuing uninterrupted, do not forget, yet do not force. Lao Tzu said, The single-minded energy is most supple, able to be like an infant. This is the perfection of true harmony. The master of the Jade Moon, a spiritual alchemist, said, when husband and wife meet in old age, their feelings are naturally affectionate. A classic says, tie them into one whole, mix them in one place, make them into one piece, force them in one furnace. The same classic also says, cow and bull go along with each other, sun and moon are in the same place. Positive and negative charges merge, metal and fire commingle. The reality behind all of these sayings is spirit and energy being together, which means mind and breathing being together. Spirit is essence, energy is life. This is what is meant by the classic saying, the root of essence is rooted in mind. The stem of life stems from breathing. It is necessary to know that creative evolution only takes place when spirit and energy are joined into one. The joining of the two into one is the reversion of the two modes, yin and yang, back into one totality. This is called the twin cultivation of essence in life. The twin cultivation of essence in life is a matter of keeping the mind and breathing together, not letting them separate even for a moment. Therefore, an ancient alchemist said that firing the medicine to produce the elixir means driving energy by spirit, thereby attaining the Tao. In daily practice, it is essential to embrace the breathing steadily with the mind and embrace the mind steadily with the breathing. When you have done this for a time, once you reach even balance, you naturally become very stable and concentrated. You plunge into a profound trance where there is no sky and no earth, where you forget about everything, including your own body. This stage is the experience referred to by the classic saying, knowing the white, keep the black, and illumination of spirit will come of itself. You seem to feel body and mind revitalized and supple, with unusual buoyancy and well-being. One alchemist said that in this state, you are like someone without the power of speech eating honey, unable to tell of its sweetness. Another alchemist said, almost imperceptible, the first transformation of yin and yang, heaven and earth, full of living energy, suddenly revolve. Therein is a bit of fine scenery. How can this work be put into words? This time is what is known as the one primordial energy coming from the void of space. As one alchemist said, the winter solstice is midnight, where you find the celestial mind has no change, where creative energy first stirs before myriad things are born. This is what is referred to in alchemical texts as living midnight. One alchemist said of this, gather energy quickly when winter comes. Another said, gathering means gathering without trying to gather, which means splitting open the primordial indefinite. This splitting open the primordial indefinite refers to the time of ultimate emptiness and perfect quietude. To empty oneself to the ultimate extent and preserve quietude to perfection is known as returning to earth, the spiritually receptive mode. Earth, The receptive is associated with the southwest. It is known as the region where the medicine is produced, the land of primordial non-differentiation, and the opening of the mysterious female. An alchemist called Seeker of the Fundamentals said, if you want to look for the primordial seed of realization, you must seek out undifferentiated wholeness to set up the foundation. Understanding Reality, the classic of spiritual alchemy, says, if you want to attain the immortality of the open spirit, you must set the foundation on the mysterious female. Once the foundation is set up, the open spirit does not die. Then how can the person die? The aforementioned self-refinement, setting up the foundation, and gathering the great primal medicine are all the same for men and women. Therefore it is said, the great way does not make a distinction between men and women, yin and yang. In their various combinations, all are the same. After this, I'll talk more about temporal difference. In his Secret of Feminine Alchemy, I-ming says, there is a true secret about starting practice. The operation is as different for men and women as sky from sea. The principle for men is refinement of energy. The expedient for women is refinement of the body. Men begin practice with the attention in the lower abdomen, just below the navel. Women start work with the attention between the breasts. Immortal Sister Zhang, one of the great Taoist women, was initiated long ago by Lu Yan, one of the ancestors of spiritual alchemy. Lu told her, after midnight and before noon, settle the breathing and sit. As the energy passes through the mid-spine and on through the brain, gaining the power of energy, contemplate the self. Lu also said, you must find the ancestor of your own house. Thunder in the earth rumbles, setting in motion rain on the mountain. Wait until washing, and the yellow sprouts emerge from the earth. Grab the golden essence of vitality and lock it up tightly. Fire metal and wood to produce the dragon and tiger. In general, it is necessary to refine oneself thoroughly before one will have autonomy. Also, one must take the positive energy of heaven and earth day after day and concentrate to clear the mind hour after hour before the effects of the practice will be experienced. It may take 1 or 2 months, or perhaps 3 or 4 months. The length of time depends only on the depth of one's work. While carrying out the work, it may happen that women feel there is energy in the opening between the breasts that thrusts out, divides, and goes into the breasts right through to the nipples, which then erect. This is what alchemical classics call the living midnight when the medicine is produced. One alchemist said, suddenly at midnight there is a peal of thunder and 10,000 doors, 1,000 gates open one after another. If you perceive that there is form within nothingness, I will admit you have seen the original human being in person. When the work reaches this point, the 100 energy channels in the body are in harmony. While their critical apertures, the passes where energy can accumulate, are all opened. In truth, each pulse fills the chest. All is spring. Now, to explain Lu Yan's initiatory statements to Immortal Sister Zhang, after midnight and before noon refers to the fact that the midnight hour is best for finding reality. People who practice quiet sitting usually do it late at night or early in the morning. To settle the breathing means to tune the breath so that it is even. In sitting, two people sit with unified attention placed between them. With mutual concentration, pure attention is embraced. With pure attention in the center, a unified energy flows, thus pressing tightly on the mid-spine and going on through the brain. This is what is referred to as the reversal of the yellow river, meaning the opening of the spinal energy channel. Gaining energy, contemplate the self. The self here is a metaphor for pure positive energy, and the self has been refined into an incorruptible immortal of absolute unity. This is what alchemical classics refer to as absolute unity containing true energy. Find the ancestor of your own house means seeking out the very beginning of the living body receiving energy, finding the primordial point of original generative energy. Thunder in the earth rumbles, setting in motion rain on the mountain. This is the same as the saying, the white clouds pay court to the palace on high. Ambrosia pours on the polar mountain. Wait until washing and the yellow sprouts emerge from earth. Waiting means waiting for the right time. Washing means washing the mind and refining oneself. This is what is meant by the alchemical term perfumed steaming. As for yellow sprouts, yellow is the color of earth. Sprouts are the life potential. Emerging from earth means that the experience is like when myriad things grow in spring, and the whole earth is renewed. At this time, the positive energy goes all the way to heaven in the form of a fiercely blazing fire, resembling flaming wind. Quickly gather it up and send it into the central chamber in the center of the torso. This is why Lu Yan said, grab the golden essence and lock it up tightly. Another alchemist said, hold the golden essence fast, draw it carefully on, send it into the field of elixir. As for fire, metal, and wood to produce the dragon and tiger, this refers to the perfection of the sense and essence of consciousness, the first sprouting of the Tao. To sum up, it is just a matter of having people draw their attention to the inner sense of the real mind, carrying the work through the natural cycle. The dragon and tiger mean the ascent and descent of bipolar energy. If you work diligently, as one alchemist said, when that one point of energy returns of itself and sinks into the body, it turns into year-round spring. A bit of white cloud brings a waft of fragrance. Each time the rain passes, all is refreshed. Unconscious like a drunkard all day long, free and at ease, just keep the spring within the hollow. When the essence of negativity throughout the body has been stripped away, it turns into a mass of pure, positive gold. The work after this is the same for women as for men. Overall, in the secrets of the spiritual alchemy for women, these words alone should be the quickest route. Lu Yan did not hoard his celestial treasure, but divulged it all at once. It is a pity that people do not recognize it. Yet it should be realized that expressions such as below the navel and between the breasts are both representational. Do not look for them as having physical form. A classic says, clinging to this body is not the way. Shunning this body is also wrong. It is also said the whole body inside and out is all dark. It is also said, looking right before your eyes, you don't recognize the real, much less what is important therein. The development process is subtle and necessitates personal transmission and mental reception from a true teacher. Only when you have understood it do you have a place to start. An alchemist said, "How can the personal transmission be explained on paper? Do not mislead yourself by blind guesswork." Our bottom or inner trigram of our primary hexagram will be read as broken, broken, solid. We have two changing lines, both old yin. They will transform to yang yang to give us a secondary hexagram. But our primary hexagram, they will be read as their old versions, so we will read them as broken, broken, solid. We have them exact same trigram on top of each other with the same middle lines changing, this being the second line and this being the fifth line. So we'll read really both of these trigrams as broken, broken, solid. And see what we get. Gen Mountain. The mountain is still. It is a limit where you must stop. Gen brings each cycle to an end, defining a space where we can recognize, assimilate, and complete our experience. He creates a personal still center amid change where we can retreat for perspective and a firm foundation for new growth. He is well-grounded, confident, and of independent spirit. He is still and knows. Mountain is the youngest son, child of maturity. In the cycle of directions and seasons, he is the northeast, late winter approaching spring, the pivot between cycles. Gen Mountain above Gen Mountain gives us the hexagram. $52. Once our changing lines 2 and 4 change to yang yang, we will read each of these trigrams, the inner and outer or bottom and top, as broken, solid, solid. Broken, solid, solid, same. So that trigram then transforms to Zun, wind or wood. Zun is both wind and living plants, whatever penetrates, spreads, and grows, shaping itself to the space available or shaping that space to its own nature. She is responsive flexibility, sensitively improvising and adapting. Like the wind, she can always find a way through because she never creates any resistance, and so her influence is subtle and gradual, but far-reaching. In the family of trigrams, Xun is the eldest daughter, gentle and submissive. She belongs to the southeast and to late spring and early summer. When we have a question that we bring to the I Ching, when we consult the oracle, the answer to that question we'll understand when we know how the parts of our reading work together. Our question will always have the general context of how can I act in creative relation with the spirits or forces shaping this moment of time. The way we understand that answer is understanding how the parts of our reading work together. The key to understanding a reading is to know your way around its main components, how they fit together, and the different roles they play. If your reading includes changing lines, then you will need to understand primary hexagram, relating hexagram, and changing lines together. The two hexagrams in conversation with one another map out your whole answer. The primary hexagram shows you quite directly what your answer involves. The relating hexagram generally describes what the answer is about for you. It sets the primary hexagram in a broader context, an influence, a direction of travel, an underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all. If the two hexagrams map out a landscape for you, then the changing lines stick a pin in that map to say you are here, or at least here are some places you may find yourself. They are the immediate answer to your question. As the most specific, focused part of a reading, their message always takes precedence over all other elements. For example, the primary hexagram might describe a reassuringly secure situation, but a changing line could warn how insecure your position is within it. Xun, wind or wood above Xun, wind or wood will give us a supporting hexagram of 57. We will start by reading from the Taoist I Ching by I-ming. Our reading, a lot of that was by I-ming. He was a Taoist adept, and he wrote this book in 1796, and Thomas Cleary has translated it for us. In the beginning, it gives succinct definitions for each hexagram. Our hexagram 52 is mountain, nurturing energy by quietude. And 57 is wind, progress by flexible obedience. We will start by reading the text section, which contains our changing lines, and then we will move on to the commentary section, which does not contain our changing lines. So when we get to the changing lines section, we'll need to note that is the most important focus part of our reading, which takes precedence over all other elements. So moving on to the commentary section will be important, but not as important as that. So hexagram 52, our primary hexagram from the Taoist I Ching. 52. Mountain. Stopping at the back, one does not have a body. Walking in the garden, one does not see a person. No fault. Explanation. Mountain represents stopping, stillness. In the body of the hexagram, one yang rests on top of two yins. The yang is above, the yin is below. Yang governs yin, and yin obeys yang, so the celestial is not damaged by the mundane. Inwardly still and outwardly still, one stops inside and also stops outside. Because one's stillness pervades inside and outside, it is called mountain. This hexagram represents nurturing energy by quietude, discerning the good and holding fast to it. It follows on the previous hexagram, the cauldron. In the cauldron, One follows an initiatory process to produce illumination. Illumination comes from following the procedure. Illumination reaching everywhere without becoming defective anywhere refines the great elixir. But if you want to refine the great elixir, you cannot do so unless you discern the good and hold fast to it, staying in the proper place. Staying in the proper place does not mean empty inaction. The path has both action and stillness, and both action and stillness must stay in the proper place. In the qualities of the hexagram, the inner stopping means stillness staying in the proper place, and the outer stopping means action staying in the proper place. By stillness, you develop the abode of rest. By action, you test the abode of rest. By the former stopping, you reach the latter stopping. By the latter stopping, you master the former stopping. Action and stillness both end up in a single stillness. Stillness upon stillness, it is like the one stopping on the back of the other. Therefore, the text says, stopping at the back. Stopping on the back of stopping is acting from stillness, testing stillness with action. So action and stillness are one continuum. Then stillness does not become empty quietism, and action does not become unbridled indulgence. Action is none other than stillness. Stillness none other than action. Stillness is of course still. Action too is still. Inside and outside are one stillness, staying in the proper place without shifting. Therefore, one does not have a body. Walking in the garden, one does not see a person. Not having a body means there is no self. Walking in the garden, not seeing a person, means there are no others. Ordinary people discriminate between self and others, inside and outside, because they have consciousness. When there is consciousness, there is self. When there is self, there are others. When there are self and others, one doesn't know where to stop. If one can stop at the back, then the consciousness of self and others sublimates. When there is no consciousness of self and others, then the human mentality leaves and the mind of Tao arrives. There is only one truth. Act and rest according to truth. In repose, you preserve correctness. Stillness is accomplished by realizing truth, not by the body. Resting in the proper place, inwardly you are unaware of having a body. In action, you act correctly, acting on the truth, not in obedience to other people. Stopping in the proper place, outwardly you do not mind other people. With no self or others, having been able to stop inside, you can also stop outside. Active or still according to the time, inwardly and outwardly in communion with the Tao. Both action and stillness come forth from mindlessness. Through this one principle, all faults can be eliminated. If learners can apply their efforts to this double stilling, stopping in the proper place without wavering, then they will finish all tasks by this one attainment. Why worry that the gold elixir won't form or the great Tao will not be realized? We'll now move on to our supporting hexagram, 57 Wind, which puts our primary hexagram in a broader context, an influence, a direction of travel, an underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all. Wind. Wind is small but developmental. It is beneficial to have somewhere to go. It is beneficial to see a great person. Explanation. Wind is penetration and laying low, meaning gradually making progress by flexible obedience. In the body of the hexagram, one yin lies below two yangs, traveling the path of firmness by means of the path of flexibility, not hurrying yet not lagging, gradually progressing step by step, obedient within and obedient without, obedient below and obedient above, going from near to far, rising from low to high, like the wind going farther and higher as it blows, reaching everywhere. Therefore, this is called wind. This hexagram represents progressing on the path by flexible obedience. It follows on the previous hexagram, richness. In richness, understanding and action are united so that one can deal with things adaptively, passive or active at will, essence in life depending on oneself and not on fate. However, the path of uniting understanding and action is not easily accomplished. It cannot be done without the work of gradual progress by flexible obedience. If one is flexible and obedient, one can endure long. By gradual progress, one can penetrate. Flexible obedience, making gradual progress, getting stronger with persistence, working without slacking off, will eventually arrive at deep attainment of self-realization. Therefore, wind is small, but developmental. But though the ability to obey is a way of development, there are those who know about obedience but cannot practice it. There are those who can follow the low but not the high. There are those who can follow the high but not the low. There are those who can obey when it is pleasant but not when it is unpleasant. There are those who can obey in the beginning but not in the end. All of these are unable to really carry out the path of obedient progress. So even though they try to follow it, they do not get through. When we look for obedience in which knowledge and action are both effective, firmness and flexibility are employed together, able to be above and below, competent in both ease and adversity, effective both inwardly and outwardly, unified from start to finish. We find that only great people with balance and right orientation are capable of this. Therefore, it is beneficial to have somewhere to go, and it is beneficial to see a great person. A great person considers essence in life important, considers the Tao and its qualities valuable, looks upon the ephemeral body as like a dead tree, looks upon wealth and status like floating clouds, is inwardly always more than fulfilled while outwardly appearing insufficient, truly applies real practical steps making gradual progress, mind firm and will far-reaching, determined not to rest until the great path is completed. Therefore there is benefit. Those who are not great people cling to partiality. They obey and follow without balance or correct orientation. How can they get anywhere, to any benefit? So the benefit of going somewhere is only for the great person. Getting back to our primary hexagram 52 mountain, we will read our changing lines 2 and 4, which both have the general context. Well, 2 has a general context and 4 has its own general context. 2's general context is the heart's perception, the emotional center where you make and feel connections. And I guess it's actually, 2 and 5. And changing line 5 is strength and self-determination, clear vision, being in command. And this is the most focused part of our reading. Puts a pin in the map to say you are here, or at least here are some places you may find yourself. Takes precedence over all other elements. The 2 changing lines read together may not agree with one another, in which case we will have to just gnaw on that ourselves and see what that means for us. Changing line 2 of Hexagram 52 Mountain. Stopping at the calves doesn't help out the following. The heart is unhappy. Explanation. Yielding infirm with stopping unstable, things get a bit further. This is like stopping at the calves. The calves do not move by themselves. They follow the feet. When you stop things at the calves, it is because there is no one with firm understanding to help out. Therefore, the heart is unhappy. One cannot but stop. This is the stopping of the weak making forced effort. And changing line 5. Stopping at the jaws. One's words are orderly. Regret vanishes. Explanation. Weak yet balanced. Stopping inside and also stopping outside is like stopping at the jaws. The jaws move when the mouth opens. Stopping at the jaws, the mouth does not open at random, so speech does not come forth at random. If one speaks, one's words are orderly. One may speak so as to benefit the human mind in worldly affairs, or one may speak concerning the essence and life of body and mind. Even if one cannot carry it out oneself, inducing people to goodness is also something that builds up virtue. Even if there was regret before, the regret can disappear. This is the stopping in which one helps people in spite of weakness. We'll now turn to both hexagrams in the commentary section. Speaking of wind, it is super windy out. Hexagram 52 in the commentary section, mountain. Mountain above, mountain below. Joining mountains. Thus do superior people think without leaving their place. Mountains symbolize stability. With mountain above and below, one mountain joins another, and so on, so that 1,000 mountains, 10,000 mountains present a single image of stability. What superior people see in this is that the inherent goodness in people is the place wherein people are human, where they should remain all their lives and never leave for a moment. Therefore, they emulate the image of joining mountains and think without leaving their place. In both social and spiritual life, investigating truth and distinguishing right from wrong, people cannot dispense with thought. But if the thought is right, then they are in their place, while if the thought is wrong, they are out of place. It is important that all thoughts stop in their proper place and do not lose their original reality. If practitioners of the Tao are able to think in their place, the mind of Tao is ever present and the human mentality is forever quiescent. No external objects can influence them, so there is no harm to the thought. Do-nothing quietists may say they forget about things and forget about their own bodies, not thinking at all, but this has nothing to do with the Tao of nature and life or of body and mind, and is also one form of being out of place. Being in place means being immutable, stabilized in the right way. Thought that is properly stabilized encompasses all reason and responds to all things. Though one thing all day, never being out of place, it is as though there were no thought. Indeed, when you know the One, all tasks are done. If you do not know the One, then thought is out of place. How many students in the world know the One? 57, our supporting hexagram, which puts our primary hexagram in a broader context, an influence, a direction of travel, an underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all. Wind. Wind above, wind below. Wind following wind. Thus do superior people articulate directions and carry out tasks. Wind symbolizes gradually entering. Above and below is wind. One wind arises first, another wind follows after. Wind following wind is the image of harmonious progress. What superior people see in this is that since practitioners of the Tao live with people, they cannot but have tasks. And since they have tasks, they must carry them out. Generally speaking, to carry out tasks calls for serenity, without rush. If one carries out tasks hurriedly and without first articulating directions for those who share in the tasks to clarify why they are thus and so, then people will not follow along and the tasks will not be fulfilled. Therefore, superior people first articulate directions and then carry out tasks. Articulation means clarification. Directions are instructions. Tasks are whatever people should do. Things like cultivating character, accomplishing works, accumulating achievements and deeds, taking burdens upon oneself for the benefit of others. Directions are not only the orders of the rulers to the ruled, the instructions given by the honorable and experienced people who exercise leadership in affairs to less developed people are all called directions. If directions are articulated before tasks are carried out, then the people will know those tasks are to be done. One person takes the lead and many people follow behind so that all tasks are successfully carried out. This is like wind following wind. The two winds continuous, going together without mutual interference. This is the way superior people do good with others. We'll now turn to James Dekorne, who is a practitioner of the Tao and has synthesized several commentaries on the I-ming into one area and given his own editor's notes, which are often very lucid and profound. He calls hexagram 52, our primary hexagram, keeping still. Other titles might be mountain, keeping still, the symbol of checking and stopping, desisting, stilling, stillness, stoppage, bound, reposing, resting, meditation, non-action, stopping, arresting movement. D.F. Hook refers to meditation and yoga. Judgment, leg, when his repose is like the back and he loses all consciousness of self, when he walks in his courtyard and does not see the people, there will be no error. Ritzema/Karcher, bound, one's back, not catching one's individuality, moving one's chambers, not visualizing one's people without fault. This hexagram describes your situation in terms of confronting a boundary or obstacle. It emphasizes that stopping and acknowledging the limit, the action of bound, is the adequate way to handle it. To be in accord with the time, you are told to stop. The image, leg. The image of one mountain atop another forms keeping still. The superior man, in accordance with this, does not allow his thoughts to go beyond the duties of his immediate circumstances. Wilhelm/Baines, mountains standing close together, the image of keeping still. Thus, the superior man does not permit his thoughts to go beyond his situation. Wu, one mountain overlapping another makes stoppage. Thus, the Junsi, or chief son, or superior person, does not contemplate things beyond his position. Confucius said, "If you do not hold an office, do not give counsels on its administration." What he meant is not to volunteer counsels freely. On the other hand, if you are requested, then give the best you can. Commentary. Confucius/Leg. Keeping still means stopping. One rests when it is time to rest, and acts when it is time to act. When action and rest occur at the proper times, one's behavior is enlightened. Keeping his back still, he rests in his proper place. The upper and lower lines of the hexagram all mirror each other, but are without any interaction. Hence it is said that he has no consciousness of ego. He does not see the persons in his courtyard, and there will be no error. Leg. 2 trigrams symbolizing mountain make up the hexagram of keeping still. Mountains rise up grandly from the surface of the earth, their huge masses resting on it in quiet and solemn majesty. They are barriers to the onward progress of the traveler. The attributes of this hexagram are both resting and arresting. It denotes the characteristic of resting in what is right in principle, right on the widest possible scale, in the absolute conception of the mind and in every possible position in which a man can be placed. As in hexagram number 31, initiative, the symbolism is taken from the different parts of the human body. According to the Konghasi editors, the second sentence in the image should be translated, "The superior man, in consequence with this, thinks anxiously how he shall not go beyond the duties of his position." Notes and paraphrases. Judgment. Wipe out imagination. Check desire. Extinguish appetite. Keep the ruling faculty in its own power. Marcus Aurelius. The superior man eliminates all distractions and concentrates on the matter at hand. A large portion of the work consists of nothing more than the will to keep still. Anyone who has ever tried it can attest that keeping still or doing nothing is probably the most difficult thing that a human can be asked to do. We are an ever-flowing fountain of restless desire. The senses are mindlessly programmed to encounter their objects, and when we prevent them from doing this, a great commotion occurs in the psyche. We are so accustomed to feeling our desires, drives, instincts, and appetites as integral to our awareness that we are seldom conscious of the fact that they are actually autonomous forces, as separate from the ego or choice-making complex as we are from other people, creatures, or objects in the physical world. Try controlling an ingrained habit, such as smoking, and observe how difficult it is to impose your will upon it. Who controls whom? A quote from Paracelsus in De Viribus Membrorum. The power of sight does not come from the eye. The power to hear does not come from the ear, nor the power to feel from the nerves, but it is the spirit of man that sees through the eye and hears with the ear and feels by means of the nerves. Wisdom and reason and thought are not contained in the brain, but they belong to the invisible and universal spirit which feels through the heart and thinks by means of the brain. All these powers are contained in the invisible universe and become manifest through material organs, and the material organs are their representatives and modify their mode of manifestation according to their material construction, because a perfect manifestation of power can only take place in a perfectly constructed organ, and if the organ is faulty, the manifestation will be imperfect, but not the original power defective. The ego has only one legitimate function, to make choices. It is the switchboard in the psyche which directs where the energy of the instinctual powers shall go. If these autonomous forces are stronger than the will of the ego, they soon learn to get their way as often as possible. The main difference between an inferior and a superior man is that the latter has learned to control and direct his energies for a higher purpose. One of the best ways to acquire this ability is to learn the lessons inherent within keeping still. A quote from Roberto Osseagoli in Psychosynthesis. Psychoanalysis has demonstrated that the power of these images and complexes lies chiefly in the fact that we are unconscious of them, that we do not recognize them as such. When they are unmasked, understood, and resolved into their elements, they often cease to obsess us. In any case, we are then much better able to defend ourselves against them. The lines of the upper and lower trigrams are mirror images of each other, yet not one of them has a proper correlate. They don't connect with each other. This suggests the separation of the senses from their objects. For example, eyeballs are sensory receptors designed for the perception of light and form. Close your eyes and they are prevented from contacting the phenomena they were created to perceive. That the psychic entities attached to this desire to perceive phenomena might resist restriction is a foregone conclusion, but the ego has control over the eyelids, or should have. Not seeing the people in one's own courtyard means that one ignores one's autonomous impulses. Regulation of the psyche's autonomous manifestations in accordance with the will of the self is for the purpose of gaining a controlling influence over one's karma. As stated herein many times, you, as ego, are nothing more than a tool created by the self for the direction of its own destiny. A quote by Robert Svoboda in Agora 3, The Law of Karma. Both karma theory and quantum mechanics refuse to accept that observers can exist independent of the systems they observe. Spiritual science goes so far as to take the observer's own internal universe and its states as its experimental field. For it is within that field that karma is produced and stored. The matter from which we and our obstructions are created includes both the dense physical material from which our bodies are built and the thoughts, attitudes, and emotions that make up our minds. Tantric practice is karmic engineering within this field of name and form, orchestration of substance and action into result. First, you direct new causes against previous effects to nullify adverse influences on your awareness. Then you unleash yet further actions to negate the influence of the nullifying actions. It's like sweeping up your steps as you go along, making it seem like you were never there. How any ego could tackle such responsibilities with any hope of progress is impossible to imagine without the direction of the self. Keeping still certainly has its own karmic consequences, but when the not choosing implied in this hexagram is done in accordance with the self's will and intent, the results slowly lead to ever higher levels of awareness, eventually into realms beyond the physical. That is what the work is all about. Any other choice is to lock ourselves into a continuous round of birth and death in physical manifestation. A quote from Rabbi David Cooper in God is a Verb. The Kabbalists teach that everything we do stirs up a corresponding energy in other realms of reality. Actions, words, or thoughts set up reverberations in the universe. The universe unfolds from moment to moment as a function of all the variables leading up to that moment. When we remain cognizant of this mystical system, we are careful about what we do, say, or even think, for we know that everything is interdependent. We know that a seemingly insignificant gesture could have weighty consequences. Suggestions for meditation. Notice that every line of this hexagram except the last deals with an inherent challenge involved in the discipline required to keep still. Compare the lines in Keeping Still with similar lines in Hexagram 31, Initiative. And He calls hexagram 57 or supporting hexagram penetration. Other titles might be the gentle, the penetrating, wind, the symbol of bending to enter, willing submission, gentle penetration, ground, calculations, complacence, penetrating influence, the penetration of the wind, humility, devoted service, and submission. This supporting hexagram sets our primary hexagram in a broader context, an influence, a direction of travel, an underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all. Judgment, leg. Penetration indicates modest success. See the great man and move in the direction that implies. Wilhelm/Baines, the gentle. Success through what is small. It furthers one to have somewhere to go. It furthers one to see the great man. Blofeld, willing submission. Success in small matters. It is advantageous to have in view a goal or destination and to visit a great man. This is a reasonably auspicious hexagram. It augurs a certain amount of success for those who submit to circumstances, unless a moving line indicating the contrary is received. This is not a time for resistance, but for submission. Ritzema/Karcher, ground, the small, growing. Harvesting, possessing directed going. Harvesting, visualizing great people. This hexagram describes your situation in terms of providing an underlying support. It emphasizes that subtly penetrating and nourishing things from below, the action of ground, is the adequate way to handle it. To be in accord with the time, you are told to enter the situation from below. The image, leg. Two wind trigrams following each other form penetration. The superior man proclaims his commands and undertakes his work. Wilhelm/Baines, winds following one upon the other, the image of the gently penetrating. Thus the superior man spreads his commands abroad and carries out his undertakings. Blofeld, this hexagram symbolizes a favorable wind. The superior man performs his allotted tasks in consonance with heaven's, or the sovereign's, will. The component trigrams combine the concepts of wind and blandness, hence a favorable wind. Wu, one breeze follows the other. This is complacence. Thus the Chunzi, or chief son, or superior person, gives further injunctions in order to administer public affairs. Commentary. Confucius/Leg. Repeated wind trigrams show the repetition of governmental orders. The dynamic fifth line has penetrated to his correct central place and carries his will into action. The magnetic first and fourth lines obey the dynamic lines above them. Hence it is said that there will be success in small matters. Leg. Penetration symbolizes both wind and wood and has the attributes of docility, flexibility, and penetration. We are to think of it as wind with its penetrating power which finds its way into every nook and cranny. Confucius said, "The relation between superiors and inferiors is like that between the wind and the grass. The grass must bend when the wind blows upon it." In accordance with this, the hexagram must be understood as the influence and orders of the government designed to remedy what is wrong in the people. The upper trigram denotes the orders issuing from the ruler, and the lower the obedience rendered to them by the people. Cheng Tzu says, "Superiors, in harmony with the duty of inferiors, issue their commands. Inferiors, in harmony with the wishes of their superiors, follow them. Above and below there are that harmony and deference, and this is the significance of the redoubled wind trigram. When governmental commands and business are in accordance with what is right, they agree with the tendencies of the minds of the people who follow them." Anthony. Getting this hexagram often refers to the presence of inferior elements that obstruct our having a good influence. Because this hexagram is concerned with self-correction, we often get it together with work on what has been spoiled, hexagram 18, or repair. Notes and paraphrases. Judgment. Get to the heart of the matter and act on the information obtained. The superior man acts on his understanding by implementing it in the world. The hexagram of penetration, made up of 2 trigrams symbolizing wind, which is air in motion, suggests the activity of thought, the realm of air, trying to comprehend or penetrate something. Thus, each line of the figure may be seen as some aspect of an act of mental endeavor. A quote from Cheng Yi. Therefore, the student must exert his own mind to the utmost. If he does so, he will know his own nature. And if he knows his own nature, examines his own self and makes it sincere, he becomes a sage. Therefore, the great norm says, the virtue of thinking is penetration and profundity. Penetration and profundity lead to sageness. The first line depicts vacillation and indecisiveness. The second shows one trying to get to the bottom of a matter. Line 3 is an image of futile hypothesizing. 4 and 5 show 2 aspects of successful comprehension, and the 6th line symbolizes an inability to understand. And a quote from Elizabeth Hayek in Initiation. Man's intellect, the greatest but most dangerous gift he has received from God, builds a bridge across the seemingly unconquerable chasm between that which is personal and mortal and that which is impersonal and eternal. Through man's intellect, he succumbed to the temptation to fall out of divine unity with his consciousness. But by the same token, his intellect gives him the possibility of bringing back his consciousness into full union with divinity. By means of his intellect, man is able to understand truth, and when he has understood, he will seek and keep on seeking and trying until he someday succeeds in finding the only path to the realization of his self. The hexagram can also symbolize humble submission and devoted service, thus suggesting the role of the ego in the work. To truly comprehend the nature of the work is to serve it with devotion. There are some interesting associations between the act of penetration and that of submission. When dynamic and magnetic are in full harmony, they lose their individual identities and become one force, which is both and neither. We'll go back to hexagram 52, keeping still, or mountain, and read our changing lines 2 and 5, again, which are our most focused part of our reading. Puts a pin in the map to say you are here, or at least here are some places you may find yourself. Takes precedence over all other elements. The changing lines we will read are 2 and 5, and 2 has the general context of the heart's perception, the emotional center, where you make and feel connections, and changing line 5 has the general context of strength and self-determination, clear vision, being in command. So, changing lines 2 and 5 from hexagram 52, keeping still, or mountain. James Dekorne likes to call it keeping still. So changing line 2, again, if these contradict one another, we're to take and wrestle with that ourselves and see what that might mean for us. Changing line 2, leg. The second line, magnetic, shows its subject keeping the calves of her legs at rest. She cannot help the subject of the line above, whom she follows, and is dissatisfied in her mind. Wilhelm/Baines, keeping his calves still, he cannot rescue him whom he follows. His heart is not glad. Blofeld, stilling the calves, His heart is sad because he is unable to save his followers. Perhaps the implication is that the mind's injunction to be still reached the calves. Perhaps the implication is that the mind's injunction to be still reached the calves but was delayed there, so that the feet continued moving until it was too late. In other words, we are too late in deciding to stay where we are, although circumstances make this most desirable. Lu, keeping the calves still, but he cannot restrain the movements that follow, and he is uneasy in his mind. A person cannot achieve his goal now. Commentary. Confucius/Leg, he whom she follows will not retreat to listen to her. Wilhelm/Baines, because this one does not turn toward him to listen to him. Blofeld, he cannot save them because he failed to retire and wait. Ritzema/Karcher, not yet withdrawing from hearkening indeed. Cleary, 2, not rising to follow means not retreating to listen. Wu, because that person is unwilling to step back and listen to him. Leg, above the toes are the calves, represented by the second line, which is magnetic, but in its proper place. Above this again are the loins, represented by the third line, dynamic and in danger of being violent. The second line follows the third and would like to help him, but is unable to do so because there is no correlation between them. The third line will persist in his course without heeding the warnings of line 2. The correlation between the lines, the ideal is that line 1 correlates with line 4. In that, if one is magnetic, the other should be dynamic. So this would be line 1, and ideally this would be a dynamic line so that they would offset one another or balance each other out. And we continue that process all the way up. So line 2 and line 5 ideally should be opposites. Line 3 and line 6 ideally should be opposites. But in both our primary and secondary hexagrams, since these lines change together, all of them end up not complementing one another in that way. That doesn't necessarily mean it's not auspicious. It just is something to consider. It is all dependent on how the translators reckoned those discrepancies. Notes and paraphrases. So we were... Let's read Anthony. I don't know if I remember that. Yeah. Anthony, keeping his calves still. When we allow ourselves to be lured by a wrong motive, it means we doubt that the correct way will work. When doubt pervades, we should not act. He cannot rescue him whom he follows. If our inner eye is fastened on what another person does, we follow their path rather than our own. We can only rescue them if we follow our own path. When they see that they are truly alone, with no one to rescue them, they will try to save themselves. Notes and paraphrases. Su, the man is unable to stop his stronger master, even when the latter is bent on the direction of wrongdoing. He is unhappy about being swept along by such a movement. Wing, you are swept along by your goals and the events you've set into motion. Even though you may wish to stop and reconsider, you cannot halt the flow of action. This condition brings unhappiness. Editor. The image depicts one bound to force a situation which one either can't or won't control. He put or here, so I don't know how to read that, but I'm assuming it's a. The image depicts one bound to a force. Okay. The image depicts one bound to a force or situation which one either can't or won't control. Ritzema/Karcher translate hearkening in the Confucian commentary as Te Ching, the ideogram ear and actualizing Tao, hear and obey. Perhaps you have disregarded your intuition or inner voice, the self. In some contexts, the image suggests one disempowered by circumstances not of one's own making. Little or nothing can be done to influence the situation. And a quote from Epictetus: "If you have given way to anger, be sure that over and above the evil involved therein, you have strengthened the habit and added fuel to the fire. If overcome by a temptation of the flesh, do not reckon it a single defeat, but that you have also strengthened your dissolute habits. Habits and faculties are necessarily affected by the corresponding acts. Those that were not there before spring up, the rest gain in strength and extent." James Dekorne breaks line 2 down into 2 possible succinct definitions, and he considers them A and B. A depicts a powerless relationship with a controlling inferior force, or B, fight hard against your need to act. And changing line 5. Leg. The 5th line magnetic shows its subject keeping her jawbones at rest, so that her words are all orderly. Occasion for repentance will disappear. Commentary. Confucius/Leg. She acts correctly in harmony with her central position. Wilhelm/Baines. As a result of central and correct behavior. Blofeld. This is indicated by the suitable position of this line, which is central to the upper trigram. Ritzema/Karcher. Using centering, correcting indeed. Cleary 2. Stopping the jaws is done with balance and uprightness. Wu. Because of his central position. Leg. The place of the magnetic 5th line is not proper for it, hence the mention of her repenting. Yu Pen, Ming Dynasty, says on line 5, words should not be uttered rashly. Then, when uttered, they will accord with principle. But it is only the master of the virtue of the due mean who can attain this. Notes and paraphrases. Su. The man is judicious in his choice of words. He thereby eliminates occasions for regret. Wing. Once you have centered yourself, your words will be chosen more carefully, and outspoken or unthinking comments will be avoided. In this way, you will no longer suffer shame or regret. Editor. At its most obvious level, to keep the jawbones at rest is to refrain from ill-considered remarks. But what if one receives this line in a context where speech per se is not a factor? Speech is the utterance of words, and words express ideas. As artifacts of the mental realm, words are the components of conceptualization. All of the translations emphasize the idea of bringing order to one's words. Hence, the line in its larger context is an injunction to sort out the facts of the matter at hand and arrange them in a meaningful pattern. It can refer to rethinking a situation, or sometimes just to the need to shut off our constant inner chatter. Ritzema/Karcher's Confucian commentary uses the term centering correcting, which they translate as make rectifying one-sidedness and error your central concern. Reaching a stable center in yourself can correct the situation. And a quote from Gurdjieff. It is very difficult for a man to keep silent about things that interest him. He would like to speak about them to everyone with whom he is accustomed to share his thoughts. This is the most mechanical of all desires, and in this case, silence is the most difficult abstinence of all. But if a man understands this, or, at least, if he follows this rule, it will constitute for him the best exercise possible for self-remembering and for the development of will. Only a man who can be silent when it is necessary can be master of himself. James Dekorne breaks changing line 5 down into 3 possible succinct definitions, A, B, and C. A, bring order to your thinking. Thought structures can become barriers to correct perception, Don't jump to simplistic conclusions. B. Make sure brain is engaged before putting mouth in gear. C. When you don't understand what's happening, refrain from useless speculation. And now to Hilary Barrett in I Ching, Walking Your Path, Creating Your Future. We will read our primary hexagram 52, which she calls stilling. Key questions. What if there were nothing you had to do now? What if there were nowhere else you had to be? Where is your inner point of balance? Oracle. Stilling your back, not grasping yourself. Moving in your rooms, not seeing your people, not a mistake. To still yourself is to come to rest in your own right place. It's not the opposite of motion, but of being pushed into motion by outside influences. Whether you move or stop is determined inwardly by your sense of the nature of the time. Attaining this kind of stillness means firmly, even stubbornly, resisting the forces that would disrupt your equilibrium. Hold yourself still as if in meditation. Don't seek to grasp yourself by hunting down your every thought. You can no more make them stop by force of will than you can make your back still by holding it with your hands. Instead of twisting and spinning in circles, trying to grasp yourself, keep still. In the same way, you can move freely in your rooms or the chambers of your mind, which can be just as crowded, and simply not see the other people there, because you hold yourself still and do not resonate with them. Even if you feel as if you ought to be constantly sensitive to their presence and needs, in a time of stilling, it is no mistake to exclude all these things and be quiet within yourself. Image. Joined mountains, stilling. A noble one reflects and does not come forth from his situation. Whatever upheavals take place around it, the mountain is still. The noble one in his environment is like two mountains, joined together, present to one another, and not reacting. He is still inwardly and reflects. He is still outwardly, staying within his situation, not seeking to act on it or escape from it. Outer and inner stillness reinforce one another. Sequence. Stilling follows from hexagram 51, shock. Things cannot end with stirring up, stop them. And so stilling follows, which means stopping. There's a natural alternation between change and stillness. And in human experience, a time of shock and reactions to reactions to reactions eventually needs to be stilled. Change consolidated and equilibrium restored. First, the drum is struck, and the spreading vibrations set the whole drum head quivering. Then you bring your hand down to damp the vibrations and still the drum. And our secondary hexagram, or supporting hexagram, which puts our primary hexagram in a broader context, an influence, a direction of travel, an underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all. Hexagram 57, she calls subtly penetrating. Key questions. How can you get to know this from the inside? What is taking shape? Oracle. Subtly penetrating, creating small success, fruitful to have a direction to go, fruitful to see the great person. Subtly penetrating means becoming part of something or someone. It describes all-pervading influences like the wind shaping the landscape. You penetrate subtly by feeling your way into things, yielding gently to their nature. You shift your own ideas and expectations and come to understand the situation from inside, on its own terms. And so, as you allow things to shape you, you also reach a place where you can shape them. The old Chinese character for subtly penetrating shows a stand bearing the official seals a ruler would bestow on those he trusted. Someone who bows down and accepts a seal is submitting to the order of things, entering in and receiving his place within it. Then his seal, sign of personal authenticity, endows him with influence and the power to make his mark. Whatever penetrates subtly becomes influential, not by acting on situations or people to change their nature, but by becoming part of their nature and acting in them. Because it never acts as an antagonist, it never creates resistance and permeates everywhere. Such influence does not bring sudden transformations. It works imperceptibly in tiny increments, only creating small success. It is useful to align all these small shifts with a single intention that leads direction to the changes, that lends direction to the changes. And whether you see them in the flesh or with your inner eye, it's good to have a clear vision of the great person, a model of the larger possibilities implied by small success. Image. Wind follows wind, subtly penetrating. A noble one conveys mandates and carries out the work. Winds beget winds, movement creates movement, and the influence penetrates everywhere. This is a time to use your own inner seal of office to translate what moves you inwardly into your influence in the world. When a noble one receives a mandate, she conveys it onward by sending out orders, and so her indirect influence reaches further than direct action ever could. Sequence. Subtly penetrating follows from Hexagram 56, traveling. The traveler has no place where he is accepted, and so subtly penetrating follows. Subtly penetrating means entering in. The traveler followed his own path and minimized his interaction with his surroundings, not expecting to change them or be changed by them. But presently, the traveler must come home. There is a time for acceptance and the interpenetration of inner and outer worlds. Pair. Subtly penetrating forms a pair with Hexagram 58, opening. Opening, seeing. Subtly penetrating, hidden away. Some things are in plain view, some are hidden away. Among people, there is explicit communication and there is the subtle interpretation of lives in countless small ways. Subtle interpenetration of lives in countless small ways. We will turn back to Hexagram 52, our primary hexagram, to read our changing lines 2 and 5. Our changing lines, again, are the most focused part of our reading. It puts a pin in the map to say you are here, or at least here's some places you may find yourself, and takes precedence over all other elements. Because we have two changing lines, they may not 100% agree with one another, in which case we are to wrestle with that ourselves. Changing line 2 has the general context again of the heart's perception, the emotional center where you make and feel connections. And changing line 5 has the general context of strength and self-determination, clear vision, being in command. I'm not sure if it'd be helpful to screenshot this or not. I would just recommend picking up a copy if you're interested in this as a start out initial commentary. So changing lines 2 and 5 of our primary hexagram 52, stilling. Changing line 2, stilling your calves, not rescuing your following. Your heart not glad. Your calf muscles are just one connected part in a whole system of movement, so stilling them won't check your momentum altogether. It's as if you stop yourself moving forward, but you're standing on a moving surface. The whole situation is already underway, and this is stronger than your intention. You can't bring it to a complete stop, no matter how much you want to. And our changing line 5. Stilling your jaws, words have order. Regrets vanish. When you still your jaws, you give yourself time to pause and reflect before using words, in speech or in thought. You don't blurt things out in reaction, or leap to conclusions, or make unfounded decisions. Instead, your words, spoken or unspoken, have order. They are in harmony with your intent, and they move in clear sequence, observing what does and doesn't follow from their starting point. They set experience in a larger context, providing a sound foundation for the growth of understanding, something more than just reacting to circumstances. And so regrets for what has gone unresolved and unfulfilled gradually vanish away. We'll turn to 74 in the Tao Te Ching to close things off. And this one has been translated by Jia-Fu Fang and Jane English. Chapter 74 in the Tao Te Ching. If men are not afraid to die, it is of no avail to threaten them with death. If men live in constant fear of dying, and if breaking the law means that a man will be killed, who will dare to break the law? There is always an official executioner. If you try to take his place, it is like trying to be a master carpenter and cutting wood. If you try to cut wood like a master carpenter, you will only hurt your hand.